One of the articles that was on Drudge, I think, was Big Brother on Wheels. And this is from the Washington Post. I've been talking about Big Brother on Wheels ever since I came here. And now they're just starting to notice. But the thing they have a problem with is the fact that corporations are going to know everything about you. Look, I have a problem with Big Brother itself knowing everything about me. That has been the central growth aspect of the surveillance state for the last couple of decades. Stay with us. We'll be right back. I'm David Knight. Well, it's Tuesday, January the 16th, 2018. We're seeing a lot of car news. Car news about self-driving cars taking over. Car news about cars watching everything that we're doing. Car news about NAFTA and whether or not we're going to have U.S. or American content. It's a big part of our freedom. It's a big part of our economy. And you're seeing all that happening now because the Detroit Auto Show is on. And you better pay attention to your freedom to move about. It's one of the few freedoms that you've got left is the freedom to go places in your car. And that is rapidly being ratcheted down. And I want to talk for a moment about where this is headed. You know, there's a story up on Reuters. U.S. lawmakers are urging AT&T to cut commercial ties with a Chinese phone company. And they said they want to oppose plans by telecom operator China Mobile to enter the U.S. market because of national security concerns. See, whenever you got a phone, everybody, it's a party line, folks. I don't know if many of you remember the old party line thing, but you would pick up the phone and you would have a whole group of people, maybe in your neighborhood, that were on the phone line, and they could listen in. And you had a human operator who was listening in and patching you through. Many people think that has disappeared. The reality of the fact is that it hasn't. You have a party line, and you've got the government listening in, you've got the phone company listening in. If you're on line with one of the face-twit social media, or I should say anti-social media outlets, they're listening in. And about the only thing that Facebook is good for, in my opinion, because I'm focused on politics and what's going on, is it's a great way to pass around information. You and I can share information with each other. It's kind of become a what was called committees of correspondence during the colonial period. People would, they had free newspapers that they would read, but they could also communicate and share information with each other and pass that information on very quickly. And the government sees that. That's why you're seeing the hard-on effort at Facebook and Twitter and Google to shut down, to censor news. And now Facebook is saying they're going to shut down news being shared. They want to not even allow people to pay to have their news put out there because they want it to be more about social interaction. Now, social interaction means that you shut down Facebook and you start talking to individuals around you. You get involved in the real world instead of this virtual world where they can watch everything you're doing. And this situation here about saying, hey, we don't want the Chinese to come in because if we buy their phones and if we hook them into our network, they'll be watching everything that we do because the government knows that's what they do. The government and the big corporations watch everything you do through your telephones, through your communication, through the internet. We have known this from the beginning. I mean, DARPA created the internet. The internet was a brainchild, not of an engineer. It was a brainchild of a psychologist who worked for DARPA. It's part of the defense industry. It is a weaponized system. Now, we have used their weaponized system against them because any tool can be used or abused. And so we have abused their intended purpose, but they're still working on it, trying to shut down what we're doing here. And when they look at this, they say, well, you know, they're going to be looking. They don't really care if the Chinese are watching you, perhaps, but they do care if the Chinese are watching the U.S. lawmakers, because U.S. lawmakers are starting to get the idea that, hey, they're being watched by the deep state. And yes, the deep state is watching them, but they continue to authorize that in an insane way anyway. As I pointed yesterday, it's only madmen and idiots who would do that kind of thing, and that's the people who we have in Washington right now, madmen and idiots who don't understand how this is going to affect them personally, even when they see this. As I said yesterday, we've got Trump who looked at this and said, these are the people that reauthorized 702, or this is what they used to spy on me and my people. I don't know about that. And then they got a hold of him and they told him, no, this is about the bad guys. They keep saying you got to look at what Michael Hayden, who was head of the NSA, head of the CIA, said, we're not interested in bad guys. We're interested in interesting people. And they find big politicians, people running for office, people who are pushing back against globalism and the establishment, those are the most interesting people for them to watch. But in spite of his best instincts, Trump then puts out a tweet, says, oh yeah, we got to use it against the bad guys. No. And then the Democrats, who are telling everybody that Donald Trump is Hitler and Stalin reincarnated, and of course, Jeff Flake is on that list as well, making now Stalin references to Donald Trump because the Hitler thing has become so worn out. He's moving on to Stalin. But they are saying that Donald Trump is Big Brother incarnate. He's a tyrant and so forth. And yet they want to give him and the people in control of the government all these tools because they think they're going to control it. They think they'll be able to use it against the other guy. This is the analogy from Lord of the Rings. Go back and read that. Look at Boromir. Look at how men are seduced by power. They always think they can take this thing and use it for good, and yet it corrupts them. It drives them crazy, and it corrupts them. That's the story, and that's why the founders of this country, who understood human nature, said, we're not going to allow that to happen. We're not going to concentrate power. That was what they were concerned about. You always hear the quote from Acton, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, or whatever. But what they were concerned about, what they spoke about, was the concentration of power. And that's what they wanted to avoid. That's something you should all think about. But one guy says, hey, I don't care if they know where I go. They're probably thinking, what a boring life this guy's got. He has absolutely no idea that the fastest growing intelligence section of the deep state has been geospatial intelligence, and that's where James Clapper has hung out since just before 2000. They're looking at your activity-based intelligence, ABI, or human domain analytics, HDA. They want to know your metadata. They don't care about your conversations. They can algorithmically look at the metadata. That's what we've been talking about with Facebook. You listen to these Facebook engineers, and they say, well, you know, we could go through here, and if I look at every, let's just say, crappy commenter, crappy person that I don't like because they're conservative, they're a Trump supporter. That's, he used the S word when he's talking about it. So, and he was actually referring to people, but nobody's calling him a racist, are they? But anyway, he said, I could go through and I can identify these people. I can shut them down. But we don't want to do that. We want to do it with an algorithm. And so what we're doing is we're trying to train the computers to search for certain things and identify certain types of people that we can then silence. And that's precisely the way this information is going to be used to not silence you, but to confine you. George Washington said when he was pushed back, the British said, don't you think we have liberty too? And he says, oh yeah, you walk about freely, but it's between high walls. And they want to put us between high walls. We also call that a prison. Stay with us. I'm David Knight. Welcome back. I'm David Knight. I want to continue with this Washington Post piece, Big Brother on Wheels, why your car company may know more about you than your spouse. The guy says, I don't care if they watch me. I've got nothing to hide. And then the Washington Post says, well, they're going to watch how fast you drive. They're going to watch how hard you brake. They're going to see whether or not you're wearing your seatbelt. Now, all that is for a particular company, the insurance company. They don't connect the dots like Eric Peters and I did on Friday for you. We've talked about this many times. And he was talking about, yeah, you know, that it's going to be a hive. And you're going to be the worker bee, the little drone that's out here. And you're going to have at least 3 queens. You're going to have the corporate queens who want to rob you, and that will include the people who run the car that you rent by the ride, and the insurance companies who will drive you out of the car that you currently own by this type of stuff. How fast do you drive? How hard do you brake? Do you wear your seatbelts? What were you doing just before you had that accident? So forth and so on. Constantly monitoring everything that you do. And then, of course, you will also have the hive of the, so you have the insurance companies, the car companies, and then the hive of the government, which, of course, Washington Post is not really too concerned about because they love big government. And Amazon's Jeff Bezos' political blog here isn't really too concerned about big government because he's going to control it. He's going to control it. That's his leverage, this little political blog that he bought called the Washington Post. He bought it for a pittance. Somebody as wealthy as Jeff Bezos, $250 million was just, you know, a little bit of time for him when the guy is making and some days he makes more than $1 billion in a day as his stock goes up and down. But they're going to also look to see where you go. and how long you stay there and so forth and so on. You ever noticed on Google when you look at a business and it'll show you the peak hours of that business? How do they get that information? Well, they're watching your phone, and they may not be looking specifically at you. They don't show how many times you've gone there necessarily. I mean, they have that information. They can go back and do it. But they're really more interested in looking at the hive. What is the hive doing? What is the mind of the hive? How can we modify the behavior of the hive? And that's why government is looking at this. That's why Facebook is doing this kind of algorithmic control. Again, they're not going to come after, unless you're a very interesting person like Donald Trump, then they'll attack you. Or you're running for political office, they'll attack you. Or you're some kind of a threat to them in journalism, they'll attack you. But if you are part of the hive, they want to know what the hive mind is doing. And how are their control tactics working? Is the hive going in that direction? They just see you as a big mass. That's why the metadata is so important for them. And looking at your metadata and seeing if they're able to control what you say, what you do, if you're buying into their narratives, that's really what they're focused on. And this is going to be a big tool for them. That's why the government is rolling out and taking away all of the obstacles. We've got Elaine Chao, who's Mitch McConnell's wife. She's at the Department of Transportation. And she's talking about how they're going to get rid of one regulation after the other, safety regulations. Now, Elaine Chao, Mitch McConnell's wife, saying, we've got a long list of regulations, safety regulations that we're going to get rid of so that we can put corporate-owned self-driving cars on the road. And we don't care about your safety. We're not going to inform you that they're there, and we're not going to monitor their safety. That's where they're going. Now, this Washington Post story says, privacy experts believe that with enough data points about a driver behavior, profiles as unique as fingerprints could be developed. Let me tell you something. They've already done it. They've been working at this since before 2000. Geospatial intelligence. They're going to know exactly what you are doing. But it's also about the hive mind. And while we're looking at this and the attack on our transportation, we've just got about a minute left. Tolls hit $44 one way in the District of Columbia. That's right, $44 to go 10 miles on Interstate 66 in Virginia. This is coming from TexasTurf.org by Terry Hall, people who've been fighting toll roads here in Texas. So toll roads have become the new drug of choice for politicians and bureaucrats as a legalized form of highway robbery. And you know who's doing the highway robbery and who's setting the fees? Foreign corporations. Most of these toll roads are owned by a Spanish corporation. It's just like the oil pipelines. I said I have no problem in principle with oil pipelines. The problem I had with the oil pipelines was the fact that we'd given a foreign corporation, a Canadian corporation, the ability to condemn and to take property, eminent domain. I don't even want to see the government having that property, let alone a foreign corporation. I don't want to see the government taxing me for every mile, let alone a foreign corporation. That's what the toll roads are about. We'll be right back.
The National Governors Association Committee on Transportation, Commerce, and Communications is chaired by Nebraska's Governor Kay Orr. In this next portion of yesterday's NGA meeting, the committee hears about telecommunications in a global economy from the chairman of the Federal Communications Commission, Alfred Sykes.
Some of us had an opportunity to visit Brussels this summer, and I had an opportunity to visit with the President and Vice President and some of the ministers of European EC 92, so to speak. We had an extensive conversation about GATT and where EC 92 was headed. And of course, there again, telecommunications became the topic of considerable discussion there. What are the implications of all of this international activity, so to speak, EC 92 and the GATT negotiations? How do you imagine that will impact our state telecommunications policies, if any?
Well, first of all, and that was what I alluded to in my prepared remarks. It's crucially important that we make sure that European and Japanese markets are open to our products and services, and that is a real struggle. And with the omnibus trade bill and the telecommunications portion of that, I think we have a better chance to achieve those objectives now. But simply stated, if we don't achieve those objectives of opening those markets, what's going to happen is that our key flagship companies are going to find themselves faced with foreign competition at home, unable to compete internationally. What is happening in Europe and Japan, I think, to a not insignificant extent, is that they want to continue to capture revenue streams that result from super profit pricing. Use those revenue streams for network modernization. Worry that if they let our companies in on a fully liberalized basis, that our companies will force down the prices and therefore the super profit levels, and therefore they'll be denied the opportunity to capture those revenue streams for their own modernization. Because it is absolutely clear that in the developed countries of the world, in Europe and Asia, that they are devoting extraordinary sums of public money to the kind of infrastructure improvements that we're talking about. Now, in this country, we have generally, in the telecommunications area, let the marketplace make those investments. We've had the Rural Electrification Administration's loan program, but beyond that, it's fundamentally been a marketplace-driven proposition. I think it can continue to be so if we understand how what we do affects the marketplace and make sure that what we do make those incentives exist.
So, quite simply put, if these companies don't have equal access to that vast market, the bottom line could be inefficiency and higher rates in our own states.
That's right.
One more thing to say here about toll roads, because you will not believe this number in this article here. I was just talking about the fact that it's $44 one way to go 10 miles on Interstate 66 in Virginia. Let's talk about what it is here in Texas. It took them forever to do a little toll road expansion on one road here in Texas, way, way, way over budget. It's called MOPAC. And even though this is a publicly operated toll, the government owns it. They don't turn it over to a Spanish toll road corporation, like most of these are done. They have toll rates that exceed $1 per mile in just the first 10 days of operation. So what that means is, they did the math here, that means that you'll be paying an additional $25 for every gallon of gas you buy. That's the way that works out. How's that? You like that? You like the toll roads? You're going to love the drive-by the rent your ride schemes that General Motors has in store for you, and Ford and the big auto companies. They've bought Lyft. Uber is on its last legs, but it's the type of thing that Uber and Lyft have been doing, and that's the direction that they want to go. But it's going to be owned by the big auto companies. They're either going to offer their competing services or they're going to swallow up the other people. So right now, with the toll road, you can pay an additional $25 for every gallon of gas you buy. And this all began under Rick Perry, our energy secretary now. He was governor here. Remember him? He tried to push through very dangerous Gardasil vaccines on people because of connections of a former aide and so forth, and we shut that down. I mean, this guy is in the pocket of the corporations, just like Tom Tillis back in North Carolina. If you want to fast track to the top of the political sphere, you just get on board with the toll road people and the people who want to mandate vaccines and things like that. We saw the same thing happen, and Tom Tillis brought us our first toll roads in North Carolina. He was rewarded handsomely. As a matter of fact, He's one of their boys from the very beginning, one of these American Legislative Exchange Council types, where they go to these boondoggles, vacation spots, and you have these corporations hand them a bill and just says, put the name of the state up at the top, sign it down at the bottom as a state representative, and turn in your homework. That's what we'd like for you to do. We would just write the bill for you. UN does the same thing with the war on drugs. But these guys are their handmaids here, handmaids of these big corporations, these multinational corporations. And so Rick Perry was absolutely, as they point out, intransigent on the toll issue. He was a zealot who was hell-bent on paying off his friends, his crony capitalist friends. And they're paying him off. He keeps moving up the ladder here. But then when Greg Abbott ran, he actually campaigned against toll roads, as they point out. He promised to fix the Texas roads without adding more taxes, without adding more fees or more debt or more tolls. And yet the Texas Department of Transportation just kept on doing it. They said, we don't care. And so within the last few months, we've had both Abbott and Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick draw the line and say, you're going to stop these plans on toll roads. And they killed 15 new toll projects in one action. That's the kind of politicians we need, folks. You need to get busy and elect people who understand what the issue is, who listen to the people who don't want toll roads. We don't want toll roads. I was just pointing out yesterday, even in Europe, 75% of the people in most of the Western European countries don't want self-driving cars. They don't care. They're going to shove them down people's throats anyway. Even with subsidies, 99% of the people don't want electric cars. They don't care. They're going to shove them down your throat anyway. And that's in Europe. That's here as well. And then in a response, you've got the Chamber of Commerce and big business creating lobbying groups, Texans for Traffic Relief, the Transportation Advocacy Group in Houston, and they are demanding that we bring toll roads back because they're the ones who are going to be making the money out of this. So government doesn't want to support your freedom. We created governments to support our freedom. One of the things they used to do was to build roads for us so we could travel freely. They stopped doing that, and now they're shutting them down, and now they're taxing whenever we go somewhere.